Yo, 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 what up, what up, what up, what up? What's the word? What's the word? Salute to everybody that subscribed to the channel, man. Math Hoffa, boy. Math Hoffa. Math, man. I knew there was something more to this story, bro. This whole math, my expert opinion situation, math going public. It looked like a clout chase move. I'm not gonna hold you. You know what I'm saying? Him going public, basically saying that the landlord was being racial against him. Him, going to the shop and the lights being off, chains being put on the doors and things of that nature. Him recording himself going to the shop with a flashlight. Just really, really weird activity, and it just didn't make sense to me. He said in the very beginning when he first initially, got the shop that the owner of the shop had made some racial comments to him. And he said he brushed it off. You brushed it off, but he made some racial comments, but yet and still you did business with the landlord. Then a lot of people, that were previously on the show, and Math was telling, guests and, a lot of other people that he actually owned the shop, that he bought the shop. Public perception would believe that to be true. Come to find out that actually wasn't true. He was actually leasing the shop. So he didn't own it. But, like me and a lot of people, it's just a location. You know what I'm saying? Something happens, whatever the case may be, you can always move my expert opinion. You know what I'm saying? Because the brand has already been established, with the podcast industry, the entertainment industry. So it's not necessarily a terrible thing that you're losing the actual location. You can find another barbershop, dress it up to the way you want it to look, and, shoot the episodes. I think the issue here was the people that was producing the content. You don't have Esso, you don't have Heineken, you don't have Bigger, you don't have Champ, you don't got the starting five that you had that created those organic conversations. I had said it before, some of their best interviews wasn't really with the guests, bro. It was them in the barbershop just having open dialogue, talking about, everyday life, talking about, the music industry, Esso giving his perspective, Mav giving his perspective from an artist standpoint, Champ giving his perspective from a journalist and someone that was been, incarcerated, and producer and things. That you had so many different perspectives from Mecca, Sean Bigger. And I think that ultimately gave a lot of character to the show. You started to really gravitate to certain individuals in certain moments throughout the show, whether it was certain guests, and Esso would shine, or Math would shine, or Heineken. Just their cohesiveness was just unmatched. They were so in sync with one another. And when that relationship fell out, it was just damn, it was really, really fucked up. And I felt that could not be duplicated. Math tried. He brought Gap Murder. He brought what's the Spanish lady from the Source magazine, Kim Rosario. Brought her in. He tried a lot of different things, but it just wasn't there. The energy, the timing, the way they would jump from question to question, it just wasn't there for me. Now, Math had a really hard time with taking accountability, and I've said this before, Math was a terrible leader. Math had a lot of ambition. I will say that about Math. He was very ambitious. When he had his mind set on something, he was going to do it. He was going to do it, but he was a terrible leader. And, him going public, telling us about the business and about certain things that were transpiring, with my expert opinion in the shop. He didn't even tell a lot of his counterparts that were on the show what was going on. They were finding out online, just like us. Mecca and things of that nature. He knew about the lights not being off because he was the one that went to the shop to open the shop up and saw that the lights weren't on. But as far as him having a $7,000 light bill and all of this stuff like that, like a lot of that information, they didn't know nothing about. And Mecca, is doing interviews on different podcasts, and, he's being as transparent as he can be, but he's just like, bro, I'm just pretty much a worker. Like, I don't have any ownership. I don't know anything. And that's very, 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 very alarming. Now, Sean Bigger speaks his piece, and he brings it to the attention that people were actually going to the shop and letting off shots, shooting up the windows and, trying to get in, and basically it sounded like an assassination attempt on Math Hoffa. I don't know if that was smart to say on camera because you could be incriminating yourself, but he was very descriptive. Very, very descriptive. He also talked about a semi-altercation that he had with Math Hoffa the last day that he pretty much called it quits on the podcast. I believe it was the episode with Jazzo. And, he was like, Math was shady, man. Math never paid him. Math was when Sean Bigger left, Math was trying to hire his security behind his back, and Sean Bigger's security was loyal to him. And he said, when I was there, nobody never tried to press Math. Nobody never came to the shop with no aggressive behavior. Nobody tried to shoot the windows up or shoot at the shop. None of that happened. So he's like, that's the reason why they were kicked out of the barbershop. Because people were coming to the shop, shooting shots off at the shop. And this is a residential, neighborhood in Harlem. There's businesses and things of that nature. They're not trying to have that shit, bro. They're not trying to have that, man. And that's ultimately the reason why. Now, I can understand why Math wouldn't want that type of information out there just from, a criminal aspect and also, branding. It's like, man, who's going to want to work with me if the word gets out that people are trying to attempt to assassinate me? People are coming to the shop, shooting up the windows and things of that nature. I think when it comes to that point where you can't afford to hire armed security to be there to protect not only yourself but the guests and your employees, it's time to move and go, bro. And I think Math trying to be cheap and cut corners and things of that nature, it just shows, like I said, the lack of leadership, the lack of accountability, And now you got this information out there. Since then, I haven't seen Math really address it, which leads me to think that it has to be true. It has to be true, And I wonder what made Bigger come forward and devolve that type of information. You know what I'm saying? Like what transpired? What conversation was had behind the scenes that ultimately led him to put that type of information out there? That's a serious accusation, man. Now I see Math has collaborated with Ray Daniels with this series called The Cut, where basically they're going to city and they're looking for MCs to pretty much, freestyle, and I guess they're giving them an opportunity, to rap. But I don't know, man. It's very alarming. But in a nutshell, man, I honestly feel like my expert opinion is over, bro. It's over. He's basically, saying that, I'm going to take a page out of Adam 22 book and be, vulnerable with my fans. It's like, bro, you got 1 million subscribers on your channel. 1 million subscribers. You're producing content from your living room and you're not even cracking 5,000 views on certain subjects and things of that nature. You're putting clickbait titles. What's next for my expert opinion? Is my expert opinion dumb? You're recycling old topics and things of that nature. I think it's done, bro. And if you look at the success for Bag Fuel, I remember when Bag Fuel only had like 2,000-3,000 subscribers. These guys, man, I think they're well over 50-something thousand subscribers. They're having a lot of great moments and episodes on their podcast. So, they're thriving. Champ is doing a great job with his podcast. It's thriving. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of people that left that show, man, are doing pretty good for themselves, man. I think it's just a testament to his leadership and him and his lack of accountability. You know, and I think ultimately is going to continue to be his downfall. But I don't know, man. Let me know what y'all think in the comments section, man. Is my expert opinion officially done? Let me know what you think. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the like for your boy. It's your boy Acito. I'm out of here, y'all. Peace.